أهلا وسهلا فيكم. Welcome to our new training from KHOUBOURAT Training Series. معكم شيرين البابا، مديرة برنامج خبرات للموارد البشرية من إرادة. إرادة اللي هي اتحاد رجال الأعمال للدعم والتطوير، وهي مجموعة من رجال أعمال وأصحاب مهن حرة من أطباء ومهندسين ومحامين حبوا يعملوا اتحاد لخدمة المجتمع المدني. وبالتالي إرادة بتضمن العديد من البرامج، أهمها برنامج خبرات اللي بيقدم خدمات متكاملة من الموارد البشرية، من ال HR consultations، الكارير guidance، وأهمها تشبيك للتوظيف. ببرنامج خبرات بنساعد بتوظيف كل الجوب سيكرز من مختلف مستوى الخبرات العملية داخل وخارج لبنان، ومعدل التوظيف الشهري لدينا رغم الظروف الصعبة 30 ل 40 شخص. كما نقدم شهرياً تدريبات أونلاين بكل ما يتعلق بالemployability skills، بتلاقون كلهم ريكوردد ومحطوطين بالتريننج سكشنز عنا بالويب سايت. اليوم عنا سيشن كتير مهمة لكل امبلوير ولكل موظف، وبكل فخر واعتزاز today's session حيقدمها دكتور يوسف سيداني. دكتور يوسف هو دين at AUB Suliman Olayan School of Business, who is Professor of Leadership and Business Ethics. He has teaching experience in several disciplines within business and organizational management, including business ethics, leadership, and organizational behavior courses at the undergraduate MBA and EMBA programs. He has also collaborated with IDRAC Queen Rania Foundation in Jordan to deliver popular online courses to thousands of learners across the Arab world. He is a member of several professional and academic organizations, including the American Institute of CPAs, the Lebanese Association of Certified Public Accountants, the Academy of Management, Academy of International Business, the Society of Business Ethics, and IRADA. IRADA اللي هي Lebanese Businessmen's Federation for Support and Development. اليوم الويبينار حيكون حوالي ساعة، هيتقسم تقريباً بين 40 دقيقة presentation، وآخر 20 minutes حيكون Q&A section. فيكم تحطوا كل الكومنت أو الاستفسارات اللي عندكم إياها بالQ&A sections اللي مبينة عندكم، ودكتور يوسف إن شاء الله حيجاوبكم على جميع استفساراتكم. دكتور يوسف تفضل.
شكراً شيرين. Thank you. The presentation will be in English, so I'll be speaking in English, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me for this session, and it's a matter that is very dear to my heart. It's about ethical leadership, and a little bit of background about myself. I'm a professor here at AUB at the Olayan School of Business. I've been with the School of Business. Now this will be my 21st year. And my background has been in, my initial background was in accounting and auditing, and I worked for a bit in this domain. And this domain, as you know, has a lot of intersection with business ethics in terms of issues of fraud prevention, fraud detection, and similar related things. And because of my teaching and my research, I found myself without really pure intention from my side, concentrating on business ethics as a field of study, field of teaching, and field of research. It just happened that at the School of Business, there's a requirement for us as a school to make sure that our students have attained a certain degree of knowledge in terms of ethics. And many of my colleagues and I, we were among the first to take on this new task of teaching business ethics. And when I started talking and teaching business ethics, very similar to my colleagues, it was something new, because usually people who talk about ethics are philosophers. They are trained in philosophy, and that's their bread and butter, which is not in our case. We are business people. Our background is business. We come from various business disciplines. Some of us come from accounting, auditing, entrepreneurship, family business, marketing, data analytics, and what have you. But as time passed, and as we get more interaction with the world of business, we find that this is very important. In a school of business, sometimes you have the false impression that we are about profit maximization. And I remember my first lecture at AUB, I think it was my very first lecture at AUB. It was an economics class, and the economics 211, microeconomics, and the professor one of the first things that he said was, what's the objective of a business? It's to maximize profits. So we enter into a school of business, and we enter into the business world even after graduation with this notion that businesses are after making money, which is fine. We are after making a certain return on investment for shareholders. There's nothing wrong with that. This is ethical. It's okay and ethical and even required for a business to make money for its shareholders, so that they can have some sort of return on their initial investments. But sometimes we cross the line. Sometimes businesses and their desire to achieve more profits because of competition, because of pressures of life. Sometimes we cut corners and we take shortcuts to profitability, and we might be compromising issues of ethicality. And this is what we see in business, not only in Lebanon, but across the whole world. Actually, the scandals that happened in many parts of the world are numerous. They have entailed losses for millions of individuals who lost their money. Either they lost their shares, they lost their jobs, they lost their retirements. Some people lost everything because of the greed of a certain class operating in organizations. That's why the issue of ethical business and ethical leadership has gained lots of momentum over the past few decades. And part of my grounding has been in leadership. So I come with a leadership preparation, and then teaching about ethics, researching about ethics with leadership preparation positioned me very well to try to understand this phenomena called ethical leadership. And to be transparent about it, ethical leadership is not something that has been researched for long. It has been researched kind of indirectly, from a research perspective. But this type of investigation has gained lots of attention after the scandals of the past 2 or 3 decades. In the States, you have the case of Enron. In Lebanon, you have the cases of, Bank al-Medina and other cases. In many other parts of the world, you find cases where a lack of business ethics could have been among the problems that caused, losses to individuals. And as I was, trying to think about this presentation, I came across this online article by Vogue. This is it's not a business magazine, as you know, but they have a very interesting article that was published 1 year after the Beirut explosion. And I read it very recently. It's the title, "A Year After the Beirut Explosion, Lebanon is Still Suffering. Here, 3 designers share their stories." And the article talks about the stories of 3 designers who are operational are operational in Beirut, and they were exposed one way or another to the explosion of Beirut. And this triggered something in them. So there was some sort of trigger for these designers, in terms of what does this explosion mean to them in terms of their businesses, in terms of their leadership, in terms should they close shop and move on to a different part of the world like many of us are doing, or should they stay? Is there some sort of a mission that they needed to serve? And I'll read to you one quotation from this article. And yet, Kairouz, Mirhij, and Mansour, these are the 3 designers, are committed to keeping parts of their brands firmly rooted in Lebanon. They have businesses in Paris and in other parts of the world, but they have some sort of presence in Lebanon. Kairouz's production team is in Beirut. Mansour's atelier and showroom are there, and Mirhij's mother and pattern maker are in a nearby suburb. I can't, this is a quotation obviously, I can't just close the business and turn my back on my team. Kairouz says, I have 15 families of artisans to protect. If they are not working, they don't have any support. It's not like in Europe or another country where you have retirement plans or some type of insurance. I have to protect these people. I made it so those 15 families can stay employed. And we're also here for our clients who will want happy clothes someday. Another quotation. For me, it was important to stay in Lebanon and keep giving my team work, and to keep working with my suppliers and my artisans, Mansour adds. I have to keep this ecosystem alive, but you can't judge anyone for leaving. You cannot just, I think this is a thing that many Lebanese say, we don't judge people who leave. they made a decision to leave and they left for a certain reason. Many of us, if we were positioned in a state where we have to leave, we will leave. And many of us would not. And then the quotation goes on to say, I think it's a personal choice, but I really do hope for a better tomorrow in Lebanon. Now, what's the link between these two quotations and the stories of these three designers with the topic of ethical leadership? Well, when I read this got me thinking, what drives such people? I mean, what is the driving force that make some people make choices that sometimes do not necessarily lead to maximum profits, contrary to my first economics class? What drives them? Is it just a love for Lebanon? Or is there something else that is part of who they are, who they have become, those individuals? Is it only a matter of being an ethical leader with a certain interest in other individuals, families, suppliers, clients being in Lebanon? Or is it mere patriotism? The argument is definitely patriotism and love of Lebanon and love of Beirut is a big part of that. But there would be something about those individuals that they either had in their personalities, perhaps, in their characters, or perhaps this was developed at a certain point in time. And I'll talk about this in a minute. So when we talk about ethical leadership, I hope by today we will be able to understand what is meant by ethical leadership. Do ethical leaders in general, do they have common traits? Can we identify ethical leaders by common traits that they have among all of them? Can ethical leadership be developed in adulthood? Is it something that people develop during when they are children, or is it something that can be developed later on? And does it really matter? Is it something that matters? I hope in the course of our discussion today, we'll be able to answer some of these questions. Now, when we talk about ethical leadership, let me enter this through a brief case. Here, I'm summarizing a case that I love to give to my students. This is a video case. I usually give it in a video format to my students. It's a real case. And here I'm providing a brief summary of this case. You are an experienced and trusted consultant, and you've just been hired as CEO to turn around a troubled company. So sometimes companies hire the consultants to turn around the company. A consultant was there, and then the company hired this consultant to turn around a certain company. The veteran director, one of the old-timers in this company, who is now reporting to you. You are the consultant. He is not buying into your vision. He is not really committed to your vision. Your meeting with him is a disaster. You make a first meeting with all the teams who are, all of them are older than you in the institution. They have more experience than you in the institution. And you are the newcomer. You meet with them, and you're meeting with this person who is at the top of the hierarchy underneath you. Your meeting with him is a disaster. It is clear that your vision is very much different than his. And he is not committed. So you feel, after talking to him, you feel this person is not buying in. He's not really going to help me. He's going to be an impediment. He has so much social capital in the organization. Everybody loves him. So this person is not just anybody. This person has a long time in this institution, and this person is loved by everybody. He has cancer, and this is the twist in the story. He has cancer, and it turns out to be, for this cancer to be a terminal cancer. And the question that is usually raised before students, what should you do? You are the leader, and now you are faced with a certain situation. You have a certain plan in your mind. You have a certain vision in your mind to save this company, and now you have a major impediment, facing you in terms of dealing with, in terms of implementing your vision, which you feel is a very important vision. As the story unfolds, the true story unfolds, the CEO, the incoming CEO, decides to fire that person. He just fires him. And the question that I usually raise is that, is this an act of ethical behavior? Does this reflect ethical behavior? Is this an act of ethical leadership? We run into different discussions because I know what happened later on. This person was fired, and the person lost his job, and the incoming CEO was able to save the company. He was able to save the company. He was able to turn it around. He was able to let it thrive, and he was even able to, to buy many of the outstanding shares in the company, and he later sold it at a profit. So the whole story is a success after he made the decision to fire that employee who had cancer, and everything turned good for that company. But I think you and I, perhaps we might not be comfortable with that decision, because here we have an ethical tension. We have an ethical dilemma. And this is what ethics is all about. And, usually in ethics, when we talk about ethical dilemmas, we're not talking about a choice between a clear right and a clear wrong. This doesn't pose any ethical dilemma between a clear right and a clear wrong. Most ethical dilemmas, if not all, they come with a choice between two wrongs, if you want, or two undesirable situations, or two situations where it's not clear which is right and which is wrong. So this what causes the dilemma. The dilemma here is that you know in your mind what is good for the company, but you don't feel that just firing that person who has lots of social capital in the company would is the right thing to do, is the ethical thing to do. And we enter discussions, people have different opinions as to what would be the right decision. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Which lets me introduce to you the, how we look at ethical leadership. Who are the ethical leaders? Well, here we have a list. I do not claim that this is an exhaustive list, but this is a good enough list for us to get started in terms of trying to understand and trying to define what is ethical leadership and who are the ethical leaders. Ethical leaders have the power. So to be in a position of leadership, it means that you have the power. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have the position power. You don't have to be the CEO or managing director or vice president or the assigned leader. You might have your power because of your personality, but you have the ability to influence. This is what we mean by having the power. You have a certain power. It could be through your charisma, your personality. You have the power to influence others. And it is how you use this power in terms of impacting action. An ethical leader establishes standards. So an ethical leader establishes standards as to what is right versus what is wrong, which sometimes is clear, sometimes it's not clear. And that this is really the role of a leader, to tell other individuals inside a certain company, what are the standards? What is our philosophy? How do we approach things? How do we approach profit maximization in this company? How do we approach competition? Do we really approach the market in a cutthroat manner where everything is okay in order to win the next customer, to win the next deal? Or do we have some certain values inside this organization? So they establish standards. They show people what is right versus what is wrong. And in many cases, this is not clear. You have newcomers, you have people who are not experienced. You are put in a position of power inside the organization because in many cases, you have a better ability to envision what is right versus what is wrong. It doesn't mean that you have the right answer to all questions. Some people might be more informed about you inside the organization. You are not the know-it-all person necessarily inside the organization, but you know enough for you to establish standards inside the organization. Ethical leaders create facilitative context. So what we mean by this is that they are able to create cultures. The whole talk about culture. Cultures are very important. To have a proper organizational culture about what things are acceptable, what things are not. We can write lots of things about, we could have the best mission statement that was ever written. We can write that we are the most ethical people on the planet. But if we don't have the culture to support that, all of this is just talk. I remember, there's a company called Enron. Some of you might have heard about Enron. Enron was the company that went bankrupt in the year 2000, around the year 2000, a very large energy company that was bankrupt in a few weeks' time because of the greed of its, managers, of its top managers. And on YouTube, if you put Enron and put corporate video or something like this, you get, a 2 or 3 minute video about what they stand for. It's very emotional. If you see it and you don't know what Enron was and how they behaved, you feel this is like, this is the best company to work for. They have lots of values. They have lots of care. They have lots of integrity. The word integrity is used a lot in this corporate video. all of this was discovered to be vain talk. It wasn't really, it did not reflect how things happened inside the organization. Beyond just talking, talk is important, obviously, but beyond just talking, you need to have the right cultures. You need to have the context that would support the talk. Which brings me to the fourth point here, which is walking the talk. Leaders don't only talk the talk, they walk the talk, meaning that they act as role models. It's leadership, I usually say, is very much like parenting. You are a father or a mother, and it's very much like being a parent. You can tell your child a lot about what things could be done or what things need to be done, what is the right thing versus what is the wrong thing. But if I, as a father, or my wife as a mother, we do not really act out as we preach, we will not be able to send the message. Ethical leaders build positive relationships. So it's not only about performance, it's also about being able to build positive, sustainable relationships inside the organization and outside the organization. Ethical leaders hold people accountable. It's not about being, being compassionate and being able to establish a proper, interpersonal connection with your employees and your people. This is not enough. What is also required is to hold people accountable, to have the ability to hold people accountable. This is part of you being ethical. If you are a laissez-faire manager, kind of a manager who's everything happens, that's fine, everything is forgiven, etc. You might be a very good person, very compassionate person, but you might not be a good leader, because leaders should hold their people accountable to what they do. On top of that, ethical leaders create awareness about ethical issues. One thing in ethical behavior that is very important is termed ethical sensitivity. Sometimes good people do the wrong things, not because they're bad. Sometimes good people do the wrong things because they don't know better. They don't have a sense of ethical awareness, a sense of ethical sensitivity. One example that is usually given is, to what extent can you accept a gift in the workplace from a supplier? You work in the procurement, you work in purchasing, and you get a gift from a supplier, and he gave you, the supplier gave you a laptop, they gave you a, a camera, a sophisticated camera, they gave you something that is that costs $2,000-3,000. Should you accept that? Well, talking to people, sometimes you might be surprised to see that many individuals would say there's nothing wrong in accepting gifts. Accepting gift is something that reflects good manners. But we all know people who've been there in organizations, that's not acceptable. You cannot just accept gifts. If you are embedded in a certain organization, there are rules as to the gifts that you receive from clients, from suppliers, and what have you, because this will put you in a type of conflict of interest situation, because the next time when you want to make a decision, obviously, your judgment will be clouded by the fact that you received a gift from that person. So leaders create awareness about ethical issues such as issues of conflict of interest. And part of leadership is to grow other leaders. One of the myths of leadership that it's not really leadership quote unquote, is that persons think that, I need to be the leader, I need to be the only leader. I need to, everybody needs to be put down as long as I'm the leader, which is not leadership. Part of good leadership is to grow future ethical leaders. When we want to go to the earlier case that we had pertaining to the CEO who fired that director who had cancer, if we want to put this list and check, kind of check what perhaps went right versus what perhaps went wrong in this list. Okay. Did this new incoming CEO, did he have the power? Yes, this CEO had the power. So he had the power, definitely, this fits. Did he establish standards of what's acceptable and what's not? Perhaps he did. Chances are he did. We don't know much about, we're not given much about this incident, but definitely he had a good understanding of what things needed to be done and what things are right, what things are wrong. Now, in terms of creating facilitative context, in terms of creating a culture that is supportive of ethics, we don't know. I mean, I put here a question mark because it's really a question mark. did this leader who came in as a newcomer, who immediately fired an employee who was cancer, without understanding the dynamics of the human dynamics inside the organization, is this the right culture? Is this the right culture that you want to have inside the organization? I really don't know. I don't think this is the case. Did he act as a role model? I would argue no. I don't think. I give this case usually, and I personally have a problem, despite the fact that this leader was effective. He was an effective leader because he was able to turn the company around, which is a very good, important indicator of success, of effectiveness as a leader. But I don't think he acted as a role model. When I think about such a case, I don't think this is it's not a good lesson to say that if somebody's faced with this situation, the needs of the company and the need to maximize profits should come before the needs of that employee or another employee. I don't think in this instance, he acted as a role model. Did he build positive relationships? I don't think he did. We don't know much about what happened with his relationship with other employees who stayed. I would assume that it wasn't good. I assume that there was some type of fear inside the organization. I don't know how he turned the company around, but perhaps he turned it with a new team that he brought in later on. Did he hold people accountable? Definitely he did. So definitely this person was a leader in a way, in terms of holding people accountable. He held people accountable even at the very start, when he saw a mismatch of vision and he saw that the other person's vision was not aligned with him. He was, he held him accountable and he fired him. He could have held him accountable in a different way, but he chose to fire him just to get the ball rolling in a faster way. Did he create awareness about ethical issues? Definitely not, because he sent the message that it's about profits, about turning this company around. Now, if this were a class where we could have a discussion, etc., I think some of you will tell me, will tell me with a very good argument. Well, look at the end result. One person lost their job because there was misalignment of vision. But if he didn't do that, and he started to compromise, one case after the other, he might not have been able to turn around the company. That's a good argument, and that might be true. But herein, I'll give you one takeaway for today, which is the following. In ethics, there's something that we call moral imagination. Moral imagination. When you think about imagination, we don't think about morality. We think about art. We think about things that are not that are very abstract. We don't think about ethics. But the issue of the concept of moral imagination is very interesting. It tells you when you face an ethical dilemma, use your imagination to come up with solutions. You don't have to look at the world as a 0-1, as a binary type of situation, black and white. You can approach ethical dilemmas with some sort of creativity. Use your imagination. It's not I keep the person or I fire him. No, there could be a third option. I could try to spend more time having him, getting committed to my vision. I could restructure the organization to put him in a different location. I could show him some data about the need to, I could spend more effort in terms of getting the buy-in of this employee and other employees. Many other options could have been made available. He did not make that choice. And that's why I say this person was an effective manager. He was able to turn the company around. But in my mind, in my opinion, he did not meet, all the aspects of ethical leadership. Did he grow future ethical leaders? He did not as well. I think he did not really grow future ethical leaders as well. So you find this as a mixed case. A very effective manager, definitely this person was a very effective manager, but not an ethical leader. When we put the announcement on LinkedIn, on our school's social media, one of my colleagues, he commented, he said, well, ethical leadership, well, if it is not ethical, can you really call it leadership? And that's an interesting notion that I'll come back to in a minute. But when we talk about ethical leadership and the issue of an effective leader who was able to perform, who was able to bring in more money, versus taking into consideration the relationships and of inside the company and what is right in terms of dealing with people who are in this institution, we run into tensions. We run into ethical tensions. And these tensions include empathy versus performance. To what extent do we need to empathize? We need to have compassion towards employees at the expense of performance. So sometimes if we are too much into the performance side of the equation, we might be less empathetic. Sometimes when we are too empathetic, we might compromise on the necessity to operate, to perform, to make money for the shareholders. So think of this as a continuum. On the one hand, you have performance and effectiveness. On the other hand, you have compassion and empathy. And it should not be an either-or type of situation. But sometimes there's tension between being considerate, compassionate, empathetic with your employees versus being strict with them in terms of performing. You need to perform. We have deadlines. We have to bring money in order to pay your salaries. So you have to send both messages, and sometimes this creates tensions inside a certain organization. The same type of tension is between being oriented towards people versus being oriented towards the task. So is it about people inside the organization? To what extent I need to be good to them, I need to be considerate of them versus being concerned and focused on the task at hand, on performing, on delivery, and what have you. And again, the answer is that, well, can't we do both? Can't we have a context, a culture where we are compassionate towards people and at the same time we perform? Can't we have both? And the third thing is being nice versus being assertive. The first two pertain to your approach as an organizational level. But this third one, which is being nice versus being assertive, this happens at a very personal level, I would say, very personal level. One of the key takeaways, I think, for any discussion about ethical leadership and for your development as a leader, if you are concerned, if you're interested in understanding what does it mean to be an ethical leader, one key takeaway that I can leave you with is the following. Do not be trapped into the nice person trap. What do I mean by this? Sometimes being nice is, not sometimes, being nice is something that is admired. It's a virtue. Being nice is something that people love. And people will like you. People will love you for being nice. And people will speak good of you. And people would like to befriend you. They would like to be your friend. They would like to go out with you, to have a coffee with you. Granted, people like to be in the neighborhood of other nice people. But when it comes to leadership development, being trapped in something called a nice manager, if you are labeled as a nice person, sometimes this could be counterproductive to your leadership position inside a certain company. It could be, I'm not saying it's always the case. It could be an indicator that you are not assertive, that you are not able to take the hard decision, that you are not able to tell a person no, that you are not able to discipline an underperforming employee, that you are not able to fire an employee who is not willing to perform even after giving him more than one chance. If you are in that trap of not being able, of being nice to the extent where you are not able to make a decision, to the extent that you are not able to show your assertiveness, then this will have negative consequences on your leadership development. Because in the minds of people, you are this nice person, this good person, whom I can have coffee with, but who is not well suited for a leadership position. So the next time the promotion opportunity comes up, you will find that this other person in the other office who was competing with you on the job, who is perceived to be very rude, for example, but competent, not very nice, not very compassionate, but competent, but performing, he might get the job and you might not get it. This is not an invitation for not being nice. Again, so don't get me wrong here. It's not an invitation for not being nice. It is an invitation not to be put in that trap where you are perceived as not being able to make a decision. Another question that I think is important to put here, should you be an ethical leader? That might be a question that, I'm not asking should you be an ethical person, because the answer is definitely yes, you should be an ethical person. Morality is something that's very important. But should you be an ethical leader? meaning that is leadership part of what you want to do in life? Do you want, not everybody needs to be, the leader of this organization or this unit. To some individuals, leadership is not part of their identity. I put here this cap, so to some it is, to some it is not. Some researchers, teachers, artists, painters, poets, musicians, I don't know, they don't see leadership as part of who they are. They look at themselves as good citizens, as good employees, as good elements of the society, good elements of a certain organization, but they don't see it part of their identity that I want to be a leader. And that's fine. If this is the choice that you have for your life, for your career, for your future, that's fine. For many of us who are in business, by default, because we are in a hierarchy, when you are positioned in a hierarchy, like most of us or all of us, then by default, leadership would become part of our identity one way or the other. Okay, so now, so one question that it comes to mind is, how can a person become a leader? I'm not talking only about ethical leadership, I'm talking about leadership in general. And here, this pie chart reflects a certain type of observation, is that whatever you get from a lecture, from a webinar, from a book, is very important because you have key takeaways, like the ones that I'm giving you. I think they are very insightful. They could be very insightful to many of us. We can get this from a YouTube video that we see, from a book that we read, from an article that we come across, etc. But in terms of leadership preparation, this comprises 10% of our ability to become leaders. There are the remaining 90% depends on two other things. Another 20% roughly is role modeling. So you look at a role model and you see a role model inside the organization, outside the organization, in the family, a boss, a friend, a teacher, what have you. And by observing the role model, by looking at their behaviors, what they have done right, why they are role models to you, by just being in contact with a role model, a good mentor, you will have accomplished roughly another 20%. That would accumulate 30% in total of your leadership potential. And the remaining 70% is what you see here, is about doing. What I'm trying to say here, we perfect things by doing. So in order to be a good, painter, you need to paint more. In order to be a good musician, you need to, play the piano more. In order to be a good basketball player, you know to throw the ball more. In order to be a good leader, you need to put yourself in a position where you have to exercise your leadership traits and qualities. And how you can do that, in many ways, volunteering, internships, what have you. All of these are important for a person to learn leadership through doing. The best way to learn leadership is through doing. In ethics, we talk about how Aristotle understood virtues. And virtues, according to this perspective, is not something that you are born with. Virtue is something that, or many virtues are some things that you develop. You are not generous because you were born generous. You are generous because perhaps your mother gave you frequently, she gave you money to give away to the poor. You practice generosity and then you became generous. So practicing generosity leads to a person becoming generous. Same thing with leadership. Practicing leadership, whether in organizations, in volunteer work, and what have you, will lead to somebody becoming a leader. Right? Relying on the classroom and role modeling is very important. Obviously, it comprises 30% or more of your leadership potential, but it's not enough. So here I've talked about lots of key takeaways in terms of leadership. There are other key takeaways. I talked earlier about if it's not ethical, is it leadership if it's not ethical? That's a question that was raised by my colleague on the LinkedIn post. And my answer is, yes, I understand where you're coming from, because in your mind, leadership is, when you talk about leadership, you talk about true leadership, and true leadership in your mind is ethical. And I agree that, if this is your starting point, then you have a point. But in general, when we talk about leadership, we also include toxic leadership and bad leadership. So we take this into consideration. Leadership is all about influence. So when we talk about leadership, we're talking about one model is the 3H. it's an act of the head, meaning using your mind. It's an act of the heart, meaning using your emotion, and it's act of the hand, meaning practicing it. So the act of the mind is, thinking about what does it take to be a leader, reading, going into a class, pursuing a degree in leadership and what have you. And then, having it part of who you are, part of your emotional development, and again, practicing it is very important. So the way you might look at leadership, some of us might look at leadership is that leadership by definition is good leadership. And then they would exclude toxic leadership and bad leadership. When they say leadership in their mind, it is about good leadership. And when they want to qualify it, they would say bad leadership or toxic leadership. This is a type of differences in how we use the terms. Some key issues that we address in ethical leadership. These 4 issues are very important. The issue of character, leader's character. I remember my father, Allah yarhamu, he had a saying in his office that it was put in a frame. I hope you still have it. It said the following. I remember when I was a kid, I used to read it a lot. And perhaps I was too young to understand what it meant. I understood it at a later age. It said when money is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, all is lost. So character means something that pertains to who you are, your virtues, what things are important to you, your values. This is when you talk about a person of character. And character is very important in determining who is an ethical leader. To lose it for a person to lose character means that he or she lost everything. Another key issue in ethical leadership is the issue of stakeholders. So it's not only stakeholders means everybody who has an interest inside this organization. It's not only the interests of shareholders that count. It's the interest of shareholders, the interest of employees, the interest of clients, the interest of suppliers, the interest of the environment, the interest of the water, running a business while not polluting the environment and polluting the sea, operating in a context where we are friends, not only with people who put in the money, but also friends with everybody, including Mother Nature, as they say. Another issue in ethical leadership is the issue of authenticity. Authenticity means that somebody is true and genuine to who they are. A very important takeaway for you when, in terms of leadership in general, not only in terms of ethical leadership, do not try to copy somebody else's leadership. Try to learn from them. Try to understand what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Try to pick up some things that you can implement, but do not try to copy a certain style that another person has and try to adopt it as you want. You have your own personality, you have your own persona, you have your own identity. Try to get all of these lessons, but stay genuine, stay authentic to who you are. And then the whole issue about culture, which is very important. It's not only about who you are, it's also about creating the right culture inside a certain organization that is, that would help in creating ethical leadership. When we talk about ethical leadership, we identify different dimensions of ethical leadership. I kind of talked about them in different ways earlier. Strength of character is very important. Consideration and respect. And this is part of character, I should acknowledge. This is part of character, but I put it separately because of its importance. The ability of a leader to establish proper relationships with others should be based on a certain level of respect. Okay, even with underperforming employees, people who do not, we do it as teachers in the university. Don't we respect students who fail? I mean, a person who gets a student who tried his best and got a 40 on a test, should he lose my respect? No. A good educator will tell you no. He doesn't lose my respect. Yes, I should perhaps try to see what's wrong, etc., but he still deserves my respect despite his low performance. Ethical leadership requires a degree of moral courage, a degree of a willingness to take the decision, even if it doesn't really match the profit ends of a certain organization. Making the tough choices, even when things are not coming your way in terms of profitability. Holding people accountable, being assertive, being firm. It's very important for an ethical leader to do that. And role modeling, I talked about this as well. Now, how people ought to act. I'll go very fast here. In ethics, we talk about frameworks. So we try to understand how people actually behave, but we try to give them certain key takeaways about how they need to act in a certain manner. I'll go very fast because I think our time is almost up. A roadmap for an ethical decision-making process. There are 6 lessons that I would like to share with you when you face as a leader, as a manager, as a person. And there are 6 tests that you need to ask yourself. First, the knowledge test. The knowledge tests really is asking yourself the following question. Do I have all the information needed to make a decision? Sometimes you are a good person, a good manager, a good leader, and you try to make a decision, and you don't have all information or all the necessary information before you make a decision. So it's ethical. It is morally right for you to get all the information before you make a decision. So this is the knowledge test. Do I have all pieces of information that I need before I make a decision? The knowledge test. The second test is the consultancy test. Did I consult others? Did I consult others? Did I take the route towards consulting other individuals or not? Consulting others is part of ethical behavior. Take this this additional step towards consulting others. Consult a mentor inside the organization, talk to a supervisor, talk to a work peer without disclosing, obviously, the secrets of your specific situation, but consult with others. That's very important because sometimes when you face an ethical dilemma, others might have been there. They might have more experience than you did. The universality test. Are you compromising a universal principle that you should not really compromise? Somebody offers you a gift. Ask yourself the question, is this something that anybody can do in the organization? And then you suddenly, a universal principle comes to mind. This is bribery. Isn't this bribery? There's a universal principle you should not bribe. So again, you will be compromising a universal principle, and you should not. Another principle is that are you lying? Am I hiding the truth? Am I not being transparent? All of these are universal principles. Am I invading the privacy of my employee? If you are an employer, am I invading the privacy of my employee if I do that? Okay. The consequences test, and this is a balance of, if you want to make a decision, are the pros more than the cons? How is my decision impacting different stakeholders, not only shareholders, employees, clients, suppliers, the environment in general? So you ask yourself the consequences test. 5, the good life test. Am I a better person when I make this decision? Do I feel that I grow as a person? Do I flourish as a person? Does it really lead to my development as an individual, as a citizen in this society? Or does it diminish who I am? Because sometimes when you make the wrong decisions, whether you want to recognize it or not, in your own eyes, if you have a slight sense of conscience, you will be diminished in your own eyes. So you ask yourself the good life test. Did this decision that I'm making, does it contribute to my flourishing, to my development as a person? And finally, the transparency test. When am I comfortable if people know about my decision? If I wake up tomorrow and I find that my decision to fire this employee who had cancer, for example, if there's a headline in Nahar newspaper, Youssef Sidani fired this person who had cancer. If this is a headline, would I be comfortable with this test? Would I be transparent with this decision? And this is a very important test because things that we are afraid that other people will know, it might indicate that there's something wrong. These 6 tests are very important, and I went very fast with them, I know, but again, with the interest of time, I think it's very important to ask ourselves these 6 questions. Let me end by coming back to Beirut. Coming back to Beirut, and why I started by talking about Beirut, I want to come back to Beirut. The August 4th explosion, I think it was lots of obviously, it was a disaster, lots of calamities, it was a catastrophe at a country level, at an individual level. It helped some people look at their own life priorities. What is important to me as a person? And to some individuals, this explosion could act as a trigger event. And the concept of trigger event is something that we discuss in leadership. Trigger event is one that sets a course of action in motion, or an event that causes other events. Trigger events can be either planned or unplanned, and both may be rich with information that leads to leadership development. So what happens sometimes when you have an event in your life? It's external, it's unplanned, something that happened, which lets you question, you know, your priorities in life. So my question to myself and to you is that apparently this explosion might have acted as a trigger event to those 3 designers that I talked about at the beginning of this talk. Could this be your trigger event if you happen to be in Beirut and you have been exposed to this explosion, because it helps you, you know, put the right questions and ask, try to prioritize your life, what is right and what is wrong, where I need to go, where I need to head. But if this is not your trigger event, do you have a different trigger event that you can invite in your life, that you can really think about in life, that could act as this driving force that would help you grow into the ethical leader that you want to be? Now, leadership is not about being ahead of other individuals. It's not being able to run a company with lots of profits. Leadership is not only about who you are or about your legacy. It's about really understanding that you can make a difference in this world through influencing others. You know, this is really a very nice definition of leadership, the way I see it. Trying to make a difference in the world through influencing others, and through being able to find who you are, being able to find your true self, being able to find your true north, as they say, loosely, being able to see where your true north is and accomplish your personal mission. Thank you very much for your attention to this. I will stop sharing now. We have a few minutes now. I'll be happy to address your questions. You're muted.
Thank you, Dr. Sidani. Before we start with the Q&A session, kindly fill the feedback form that will be sent in the chat and the comment. Whomever wants a certificate of attendance, we will take the names from the feedback form. So you have to fill the feedback form in order to get the certificate of attendance. We will have around 10 to 15 minutes to answer your questions. Already we have 3 questions.
I can read them. Good governance is the key to business ethics. What do you think? Definitely. In ethics, we talk about governance. Governance means that we have organizations that run according to proper systems and processes, and to have proper separation of duties, to have proper structures that help us accomplish the goals of a certain institution. And governance is linked to ethics, because you don't want to have a governance structure that leads to effective organizations that are not ethical. So definitely, I would agree with you that good governance is key to business ethics. Can we get a recording at the end of this session? Definitely.
Let me answer this, please, Dr. Youssef. This session and all the other sessions that were presented by KHOUBOURAT will all be recorded and set on the website section. I will send it to you right now, the website. This is for everyone. This is for you. Okay, now it's in the comment section. You will get our website, go to the training section, and you'll find everything, all the recorded, including the recording of Dr. Youssef. Thank
you. Being nice is good, but being too nice can backfire on you. Exactly. This is what I meant to say. Definitely being nice is something good. I mean, I think it's a nice virtue. It's nice it's nice to be nice, but being too nice in the world of business, no, you don't want to be put in this box where you are the nice person. And by the way, if we had more time, we talk about personality, how there is one personality trait that we enjoy to different levels, which is called agreeableness. Some people are more agreeable than others. This is by nature. Some of us are more agreeable by nature. Sometimes we are just born this way, or we get this during the first few years of the way we are raised, our relationship with our parents and what have you. So some of us are more agreeable. In other words, we are more like nicer, more compassionate. Studies have shown that women in general, on average, if you want to, if you want to survey 1,000 women and 1,000 men, and you want to get how they rank on agreeableness, on this percentage trait, women on average are more agreeable than men. It doesn't mean that all women are agreeable and all men are disagreeable. You are definitely, so there are lots of overlaps. And women and men are more, they look more like each other than they are different. But still, on average, if you want to look at on average, you'll find that more women are agreeable. Now, what does this mean for leadership development? It means that in terms of coming across as nice, more women come across as nice, and more women, and this is key, more women are expected to be nice. So in organizations, if I see two individuals, one is male and one is female, I would accept my male colleague to be less friendly, more assertive, more rough, more rude, if you want. I will not accept my female colleague to be with these same traits. Our expectations of males versus females are different, which poses impediments on leadership development for females, because now when you come across as a female, when you come across as being very assertive and very firm, you are coming against expectations. I did not expect you to be this way. And so it becomes a hurdle to overcome. And that's why when we discuss leadership, we have special, if you want, special recommendations for women, aspiring women leaders, as how to come across as assertive, though not necessarily as rude or lacking compassion, without losing your true identity. Do you think working as an ethical employee in a firm that doesn't treat its employees in an ethical way is the wrong choice? I think it's not a good choice, obviously, if you have two options. The option of working, with a company that treats you ethically versus a company that doesn't treat you ethically is. But company is not a person. When you say a company doesn't treat me ethically, my question to you, is it like by policy they don't treat you ethically? Do you have like policies which are written, which are not ethical? Or is it that your direct supervisor is not ethical? Because you might have you can use your moral imagination to come up with solutions even within your own company. Sometimes you might have a good manager who is not able to perform well, who is not able to act ethically. This person perhaps needs a wake-up call that you need to perform, you need to get to the deadlines, but you should not forget that it's important to act ethically with respect to your employees. I would say my first choice, if it's not by policy, if it is like my supervisor or some encounters seem to be unethical, I would try to see whether I can sort them out. And sometimes the system is more powerful than me. It's by policy. Everybody, accepting bribery, for example, is an acceptable behavior in the organization. What can you do? People accept bribes. My recommendation to you is to get out. People, if you are embedded in a context where people accept bribes and it's like a kind of unwritten policy, my advice is for you to leave. Okay, but sometimes you can make change, and I would say this especially in smaller firms. In smaller firms, sometimes people do not have the experience, not have the awareness to understand that we need to act ethically. We need to deal with people in an ethical manner. So I would say, as a short answer, I would say, I would try to see whether I can change certain things. If I tried and I could not change, yes, then I would advise the person to leave, if you want my opinion. Obviously, this is a very general answer. Cultural masculinity versus femininity affects the decision regarding the leader behavior as per your case. Well, masculinity, we define it in organizational behavior, organizational psychology. Masculinity does not pertain, to males versus females. It pertains to which values dominate. Is it are the values of success, reaching performance, hard competition? Are these the overriding values inside the organization, or are the values of fair competition, compassion, collegiality? Are these the dominant values inside a certain organization? And you might find some men displaying feminine, if you want, values, and you might find some females displaying some masculine values. That's why we call them masculine versus feminine. In the case that I presented, it was a case, definitely it was a masculine value, definitely. So it is a masculine value of performance, masculine value of success, versus the feminine value, the importance of having a feminine value of compassion, of having this interpersonal relationship. So definitely this is a factor. There are sometimes conflicts between what is ethical versus what is legal. It is important to know and differentiate the two while making a decision. This is true. This is correct. Sometimes legal things that are legal might not be ethical. Okay, so it might be legal for me to fire an employee. One example that I always give: a student of mine who went to work for a company in the region, and he was instructed by his leader, by his supervisor, to implement the GE technique. In GE, back Jack Welch, that was a system that they developed earlier. What they do, they rank. It's called rank and yank system. Rank and yank. You rank and then you fire the. So you rank employees, let's say 10 employees, and then you yank the bottom 10%. So out of each 10, you yank the 10 or 15%. So for each 20 employees, you will fire 3 employees, even if they are performing. This system eventually will increase the quality of performance, right? Because every year you are yanking the lower performers. But it comes at a cost, because sometimes you are firing employees who are performing, they are reaching their objectives, but they just happen to rank lower than the other employees. Anyway, he was instructed by supervisor to yank the bottom 10, 15%. It was legal for him to, obviously, to fire the individual. You give him what, but it turned out that this individual in that country, he had his children in the school. It was like, I don't know, perhaps in December, in the middle of the school year. So it was legal for you to fire that employee. And then he had to go back to his country because he would lose his visa. And then his children will be left without school because they go back to, I don't know, to any country, and it will be very hard for them to join schools. It's legal, but it's not ethical. And obviously what happened, he raised this issue to the supervisor, and they came up with a good solution. They used their moral imagination. They said, look, we want to, this employee, we want to, lay him off, but let's postpone it till the summer. We can keep him for the next 7 months or 8 months before he is left. So again, it was legal to fire the employee. It wasn't ethical. And yeah, it's very important to differentiate the two. It talked about ethical leadership in terms of HR, but isn't customer relations, being transparent and honest, is ethical? Definitely. We talk about ethical leadership across all the functions of the organization, whether in HR, whether in marketing. Marketing is a big domain of your ability to perform. They come to your table, as a manager, they come with this campaign, with this very funny campaign. And funny campaigns, funny advertisements, they work. You get lots of people like to watch comedy or and advertisements. So you have this advertisement that is funny, but makes fun of, let's say, of women, or makes fun of certain ethnicity or certain race. But it's very funny. You see it and you laugh. Come on. I mean, is this really the sort of commercial that you want to, or let's say it makes fun of certain individuals who are overweight, for example, or something like this. It might be funny. People might laugh. Between you and yourself, you see it on your phone, and you might smile, etc. But is it the right thing to do from a leadership perspective? It's not the right thing to do. So, marketing, governance, accounting, and finance, all functions, you'll have the potential to exercise your ethical leadership. Business plan, timeline, and orientation might be a better solution than decision of firing, and how much being nice will contradict with responsibility and success, noting that knowledge and experience of that employee might be a boost to my plan. Well, I guess what I get from your question, Tariq, is the notion that firing should not be your first option. Yeah, obviously we have to have more options. Each case is separate. But in general, this is correct. I mean, I left you with one thing called moral imagination. I think if you only remember this thing today, that would be a good takeaway for this session. Moral imagination means it's not that I have to let my shareholders pay because I want to be ethical. I want to compromise the profits of the company because I want to do what is right. No, sometimes we might be able to come with solution C, option 3, that is not either of the two, but we need to exercise. We need to do these tests, consult with others, gather more information, consult with others, do all the things that we need to do, and we might come up with solutions that might not be obvious to us at the first instance. Having said this, it's definitely true that sometimes in business, you will be faced with a situation where you only have 2 choices. Either get this deal and you will make $1 million for this company, or you do the right thing and not accept it. All right, so you might face this, and your choice should be obviously in these cases. And many of us will face these. Let's say we are bidding for a project, and you get somebody, you pay me $10,000, and I will let your company win this bid. This is an easy, to me, it's not an ethical dilemma. To me, this is a dilemma. You should not pay the $10,000. Period. And I know this, I might be oversimplifying things because you'll tell me the competition is doing that. Definitely we have to look at each situation. But in some cases, we have to compromise profits. We have to compromise, short-term returns for long-term returns. Because look, there are many cases, many empirical cases. What do we do at universities? People who do research on business ethics, one of the things that they do, they look at how companies which perform good, how they perform in the long run. You remember the question that I asked earlier? I didn't answer it, by the way. Does it really matter? Based on research, there is some good evidence to suggest that there is at least there is no difference in terms of profitability on average between companies that do the right thing, or they cut corners, they bribe, they do all of that, and between companies who do the wrong things. If you don't bribe, it doesn't mean that you are at a disadvantage. If you think about corporate reputation, your brand image, think about what customers know, what customers might know, think about the power of the media. Even if you only want to think in terms of self-interest, you don't want to be in the wrong set, you don't want to be put in a situation where people will speak ill of you, you will only make the right decision. But I obviously urge you to make it not only for that reason. I urge you to make the right decision, and I urge myself obviously to make the right decision, because this is more in line of who we are or who we should be, and who we should be, because we should be business individuals. We should make money. We should have good businesses that make money. But at the end of the day, these businesses should be doing good for our communities, doing good for the context in which we live. Thank you very much for your time. I think I've exhausted my time. We went a little bit over. I hope that we'll have a chance in the future to make this in a different format. Thank you very much. Just judging by people who are still on, I think most people are still on, which is a very good thing. Thank you very much. If you want to contact me, my email is found on the web. Put Youssef Sidani AUB. You can get my email very easily. I'm on the directory of AUB. If you have a specific question that you want to ask, if you want to get any article or anything that we at AUB, me and my colleagues have been doing, we would be very privileged actually to work with you and cooperate with you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Shireen, for this opportunity. Thank you, IRADA. And I'm looking forward for the future opportunity, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Youssef. Thank you. Till next session, inshallah.
Inshallah. Have a good day. Bye-bye.